Welcome to the Graceful Exit podcast. I'm Kimberlee Hoertz, founder of the Graceful Exit, created to educate, empower, and support women as they navigate divorce. Beginning with us, we are putting a stop to the divorce stigma through meaningful conversations about the emotional and endearing experience divorce often brings. My hope is that you'll follow along on this journey and join our community of women navigating divorce with grace. Hi guys, today we are actually taking the time to interview one of our very trusted professionals that we have brought on to the Graceful Exit. He serves as a QDRO lawyer and hopefully he will explain what that actually means. So without further ado, Willie, would you like to introduce yourself? Both give us a little bit of background about professionally and personally.
Sure. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. I am a guy married to a goddess who is a powerful genius doctor woman. And besides that, I have a little miniature goddess that runs around upstairs and terrorizes me. She's 3 years old and she is my heart. And professionally, so I don't get all choked up, I'll just move on to that. I am a QDRO lawyer. So I do division of retirement accounts either during the divorce, when it's close to the end, or right after, hopefully right after. I've actually done some as little as 30 years later, which is just insanity, but we'll save the horror stories for another time.
Okay, so you are not based in Southern California. However, you are practicing in Southern California. So can you explain a little bit about where you live and then how or what states you actually can service in?
Sure, absolutely. So when I met that lovely goddess wife of mine, I chased her out to New York. She's a medical resident and doing physical medicine and rehab out here. So we're out here for at least one more year. I was originally a California lawyer and I picked up bar cards in 6 other states. So California, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, North Dakota, New Jersey, and New York. It's hard to keep track. But I practice mostly New York, New Jersey, and California, and a handful of cases in Missouri, which is my original home state from when I was a little kid.
Okay, and so explain to us one, what are the word or letters QDRO stand for, and then what the heck is a QDRO and when would a woman need that going through divorce?
Yeah, so QDRO, and don't worry, you'll never be tested on this, stands for Qualified Domestic Relations Order. And the qualified part just means it's a sort of retirement plan that meets the qualifications of a federal law called ERISA. The difference between that and a non-qualified plan are minimal to the everyday person.
Mhm.
It just changes the way we write the order to split it up. So technically I do QDROs and I do DROs as well.
What was the second one? I'm sorry.
DROs, which is just DRO, Domestic Relations Orders.
Okay.
For Californians specifically, CalPERS, CalSTRS, LACERA, OSERS, all these local plans and state plans, those are not qualified plans because they fall under state law instead of federal law.
Mhm.
So those we do technically are doing DROs instead of QDROs. Everybody calls all of them QDROs, so don't worry about it. That's just a nerdy lawyer trivia right there.
Got it. Okay. So walk me through. I am a woman navigating divorce. I have an ex that has a pension, and I also have a 401k. At what point would we contact you as a QDRO lawyer, or does my family law lawyer connect with you? How does it all work?
Very great question. So the way it's normally done, which is not the ideal way, is the parties go all the way through their divorce and the lawyer at best will write into the divorce settlement retirement plans to be divided by QDRO. They might give you a list of names. That's how we end up with people calling me 30 years after the divorce and saying, oh, now I want to get, the pension divided. Okay, we'll do our best. If the pension's still there, if the person's still alive, all of these things could have happened to get rid of that retirement account. The ideal way to do it, and it's becoming more of a trend, a couple of states have made it a requirement, is to do it right at the end of your divorce while the divorce is still happening. The reason I wish people did this more often is if you have an uncooperative ex, the option of subpoenaing records is a lot easier to do when your divorce lawyer is already on the team and can just fire off the subpoenas and get the records.
Okay, let's take a time out real quick.
Sure.
educate the community what is a subpoena if they've never heard of it?
Sure.
Subpoena records.
Yeah, subpoena is basically a little miniature court order to turn over records.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to find out something about a 401k, I could issue a subpoena to that 401k and say, give me all the records dating back to as far back as you go.
Okay, so an example that comes to mind is we have so many women that happen to be a stay-at-home mom and have no access to these financial records of their ex-spouse. And so if they had a feeling that their ex had a pension or had a 401k, but yet don't know the balances or where it actually is stored, they could subpoena these records. Is that what I'm understanding?
Exactly. That is exactly it. So the best thing to do would be probably at the outset of the divorce for their attorney, or if they're representing themselves, it's going to be difficult to do it if you're representing yourself, but it's possible to issue those subpoenas so you know what assets are on the table. Very often, probably more often than not, people come to me, they have no idea what's in the accounts. There was a 401k, we wrote divide it in half in the divorce settlement, and that's it. And then we find out, well, we don't have records going back far enough to trace things. We have valuation issues now, or you waited 2 years after your divorce and the account's gone, that sort of thing. So it's important to get those records early.
So again, a woman could find you, one, on their own, or two, through their family law attorney or mediator. Is that what I'm understanding?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm happy to work with any family law attorney or mediator. It'll probably be smoother if you talk to your family law attorney first and say, hey, we want to bring in a QDRO person early so we can get a handle on the QDRO assets, and they will coordinate with either their favorite QDRO attorney or whichever one you pick. It's usually up to you.
Okay. And so what I have learned through my experiences is that you actually do need, in fact, a QDRO lawyer should you have these types of assets, because a family law lawyer, the court cannot have a family law lawyer separate these assets because it's done through a third party. Is that correct?
So that's sort of correct. A family law lawyer can do this.
Mm-hmm.
The courts prefer that a neutral third party does it if possible. Though I know it's common practice, especially in the Midwest where there's very few QDRO attorneys, family law attorneys will do them themselves. In California, I know very few, if any, family law attorneys who will do the QDROs, because there are a handful of us that do nothing but QDROs, and it makes it a lot easier for them to say, hand it off to the person who has expertise in the area.
Exactly. So I don't think I found out that I needed a QDRO lawyer probably until a year and a half into my divorce, in which we were finally at the point where we were actually settling assets. And then at that point, my lawyer had advised me, hey, you need to go find a QDRO lawyer. And I'm like, well, I thought I'm paying you to do this. I didn't recognize, again, my ignorance and understanding the entire divorce process. I didn't recognize that you had to have a separate lawyer to divide these specific assets. And so not only did I have to retain a lawyer at that point, but then it took probably another 2 years post that year and a half time frame for me to actually settle on the pension and the 401ks that were involved in my divorce. So had I had this information prior, I could easily streamline this effort and gotten the money that I, was entitled to a lot sooner than almost 4 years post-divorce.
Yeah, that's 4 years post-divorce is rough. That is a long timeline.
Yeah. So help me understand, how do you handle your clientele? I guess, what is your differentiation factor when dealing with women specifically navigating divorce? Because I think a lot of times, again, I don't want to be judgmental about some of these, but what I've heard is a lot of these women don't necessarily know what all is involved in their financial assets and splitting them. So can you walk me through of how you actually handle these types of cases?
Absolutely. I think kind of the differentiation factor between me and most other lawyers in general is I like to babble. So I'll take their call. I'll talk to them. If they have questions, I'm here. I give them my phone number. They can even text. They know if it's the middle of the night, I'm not going to respond till the next day, but it's it's my job to make them feel comfortable the entire time, as much as we can. Obviously, the process is never comfortable. It's a divorce, but it's already painful enough without having to, send an email to a paralegal who will talk to a lawyer who may call you back in 2 or 3 weeks, which is how a lot of law firms operate. And I never liked to be that lawyer when I was in those style of law firms. And so when I opened my own shop, I hand out my cell phone number to everybody, and I just say, text if you have questions, email if you have questions. You can call. I'm a little slow to respond to calling because I have a toddler in my hands half the day, but text is great. And I think that helps a lot, just to make sure that they have a comfort level and constant communication throughout the process. The QDRO process is weird and it's long, as you know. You have to draft an order, then you have to send it off for pre-approval, then you have to wait, and then half the time the retirement account forgets to respond. Then you get it back, maybe, and then you have to make edits, then you send it back again, back and forth. Then hopefully you can get people to sign, but probably 30% of the time there's refusals to sign and there's arguing over it. There's a lot of things that can derail the process and stretch it out. If everybody is very cooperative, I think the shortest I see is like 4 months to get these done.
Okay.
And that's like perfect. Pre-COVID times, everybody cooperative, everything signed, overnight mailing things, because that client was facing difficulty with his mortgage. So we were overnight shipping everything. But it's a long, stressful process. So the communication aspect is important.
Definitely. So you had touched upon the fact that you did work for a firm prior to going out on your own. How long have you been out on your own? And then why did you decide to do it?
So I have been out on my own for most of the 10 years that I've been practicing law. I was on my own for a few years, and then a larger firm offered me mentorship and other opportunities, a little more stability. So I joined them. I was there for a little over a year, and I loved the people there. But the biggest part of it was I met my wife, and I knew that she was going to be a medical resident. And with the matching system for residents, we could have ended up anywhere from, she had no interviews in California at that time, so anywhere from Nevada all the way to New York. And so I had to find a remote job. So then I went back to working in my own shop and doing remote work. That's how I founded a virtual law firm and got where I am today.
So curious to know for the listeners, unfortunately, I did not have you as my QDRO lawyer, and that's why I was very adamant about finding a good one to have within the Graceful Exit, because again, mine took forever, and I think it got prolonged by numerous reasons, but it was really important to me to find a qualified QDRO lawyer. So when I reached out to you, and now that you've been a part of the Graceful Exit, what have you found valuable, and why did you decide to join our community?
I think your community, or I should say our community, is incredibly important, because divorce in the traditional sense is litigation and people fighting, and far too often it's lawyers coming away with a lot of money, parties burning half their assets, and spending 5 years in hell. And I've worked in a mediation law firm when I was in law school and thought that was amazing. It was the right way to do things. And I've worked in the litigation shops too. And that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. And sometimes you don't have a choice. You may have a spouse, ex-spouse, that is just unreasonable, and you have to litigate. But that should always be the last resort. And the great thing about the Graceful Exit is there's not only emotional support and resources and people sharing their stories to empower each other, but there's also an emphasis on, let's not do things the hard way. Don't just jump to litigate and fight for years. Now, I have one client who's been litigating her divorce for 25 years, and they were only married for I think less than 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
They're still fighting. He's 80 years old and he still wants to fight.
Wow.
That's destructive. It ruins their lives. So, I really, really appreciate the mission and the network and the support that the Graceful Exit provides to the community.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, to your point, sometimes you are left with no choice to litigate, and unfortunately, that was my story. But yes, I spent a ridiculous amount of money and several years of my life trying to fight, and at the end of the day, the only thing that was worth it to me were those children. And so it's find a different way to navigate the system and bring these trusted professionals together. It's really my mission to do that. So I just want to say thank you for being a part of it. We absolutely love having you. So in closing, what is some tangible advice that you can offer to this community?
Sure. First thing is to get a hold of what the assets are at the beginning of the divorce, the retirement assets.
Mhm.
These are usually one of your biggest assets. And to just say, okay, we'll deal with this after the divorce and write 50% to each party, divide by QDRO. It's kind of insane when you think about it. It would be like saying, well, we're not going to deal with the house or the retirement accounts or the really valuable car. We're going to leave all that for after the divorce. No, nobody should do that. You need to know what they are at the beginning, because you might end up saying, well, maybe you keep this and I keep that, but you can't really trade off something when you have no idea what the value is. Another piece of advice would be to consult with a QDRO attorney while the divorce is still going on.
Yes.
Very often, probably more often than not, I get people, I didn't know what the word QDRO was until after my divorce was done.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, now it's a little too late to do some things. Or, there are some plans like military plans that are incredibly hard to split. And there are a lot of loopholes and ways for the military spouse to keep more of the money even after the divorce is done.
Mhm.
It might be more advantageous to trade that asset off for something else, do an offset. These are things we can do while the divorce is pending, but if the divorce is already finalized, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to fix that.
Yeah.
And the last one is not to wait. I know every lawyer says, call now, it's very important, but this is, because these QDROs, if you don't do them, records get lost. The company might use Vanguard one day and the next year to save money, they switch to Fidelity.
Mhm.
Well, when Fidelity takes over, all those records are gone. So now we are going to have a lot of trouble figuring out who gets what. And you're going to end up saying, I guess we'll just call it 50K. And you end up working with made up numbers or spending a lot of money on a valuation expert to go through tax records and old statements and try to come up with something, rather than deal with that nightmare and that process of digging through old paperwork.
Mhm.
If you do them right away while the divorce is pending or immediately thereafter, your chances of having the records to make it a clean split are a lot higher.
Got it. And then one thing I had forgot to ask you is, how does payment structure work for a QDRO lawyer? Is it the same as a family law lawyer where it could be billed on retainer, or is it a flat fee, an hourly rate? How do you bill?
So personally, and most QDRO lawyers I know were flat fee.
Okay.
So that way there aren't surprises. I tell people I cover everything except for the fighting. So if you all will work together, I'm happy to draft the orders. If you two want to litigate, then I'll draft whatever orders you need, but then you're going to go off and find a litigator to go to court and fight, because that's not my business at all.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
flat fees, no surprises.
I like it. Well, I just want to say again, I appreciate your expertise, taking the time to educate this community, because again, I did not know, one, what a QDRO lawyer was or QDRO lawyer was, nor did I understand how to navigate the process. So I just so appreciate the transparency, education that you have brought to the table, and then more so for just being part of this network. It's been fabulous getting to know you personally and professionally. So I appreciate you.
Likewise, it's been my pleasure.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
All right, you too.